Can you hear me, Tom?
Yes, I can.
I have a question for Mr. Miller. And the question is, what does it cost us to be using Zoom?
We had to purchase licenses for Zoom. Krista, I think, may correct me, but I believe it was about $20 a license. So everybody who hosts a meeting or co-hosts a meeting has a license. We distributed those to the key staff to do this.
Okay.
That's correct, yes.
So it doesn't cost that much then, really. In fact, it's probably cheaper than paying mileage.
Well, there's other considerations besides just the cost of the license. There is the cost, obviously, IT has to participate as a co-host on every one of these. That's not something that we have to do when we have a face-to-face meeting, but it is what it is in terms of being able to continue to conduct business during this pandemic. So
I think I'm back on. Can people hear me?
There we go. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I just lost totally lost the internet connection on the computer I was using. Sorry about that. Let's before something else happens to me, why don't we move on to the final item, which was the consideration of the action on the solid waste budget adjustment. So with that, Mr. Girk, do we want to have Morgan describe? Morgan, why don't you describe it? And if we need further explanation, we can do that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So obviously we are not reeling in the revenues that we'd hoped we could be reeling in for the past 4 or 5 years. They've been steadily coming downhill. Markets, a good portion of our budget is derived from the sale of recycling, and we've been seeing a collapse in the recycling markets over that same course of time. I want everybody to be aware that the collection sites, we run 8 manned collection sites throughout the county, and then of course the transportation and public drop-off. And the 8 collection sites are a very cost-intensive model to run. We've got annual staffing cost increases. We work with a staffing agency which has a significant markup. Most of them do. We have hauling costs that go up every year from the collection sites, and all the operations and maintenance costs that go in those as well. And what I want everybody to be aware of is that the way the model has always historically worked is that the costs of running the collection sites have been subsidized through the sales of recycling and the tipping revenues at the transfer station, both of which are also way down compared to previous decades. So just to give you an idea of how much money the sites lose, in 2019, and I'll just go through this real quick, Boyceville lost $91,468. Colfax lost $106,392. Connorsville lost $33,174. Elk Mound lost $137,369. Downsville $57,736. Ridgeland $40,888. Rock Creek $40,604. Sand Creek $46,818. So you can see that's a total of $512,000 that the collection sites were not able to self-sustain, and those monies have to be subsidized through other revenues. The transfer station also saw a deficit of $532,070. Transfer station and public drop-off, also a manned facility. So in total in 2019, just in operations of the sites alone, we were over $1 million in the red. So it is a very, very cost-intensive model to keep the collection sites operational. Now, what everybody wants, however, everybody wants the convenience of having collection sites in their municipalities, and they've had that for decades. So the problem is that the costs of running the sites were never accurately passed down to all of our users in the form of a properly evaluated per capita fee. It's always been undervalued because it's been subsidized. So the public has never seen the true cost of operating these business models. And I'll remind everybody that the Solid Waste and Recycling Division is a special revenue fund. We are a business. And so operating without expressing true costs onto our users it's not the best model. So to sustain operations in 2020, we've modified the collection site days and hours of operations to include a Saturday only model. We historically in 2019, anyway, we were open on Wednesdays and Saturdays at the collection sites. And in order to cut costs, excuse me, we're looking at dropping that to a Saturdays only model. Doing so, along with all of the other factors that we have, corrective maintenance needs at an aging, at all of our facilities that are 30 years old, coupled with the increases I've mentioned, put us at a $330,000 operating deficit in 2020. Now, we don't have the fund balance revenue to take that internally from our own accounts because we've used that to purchase equipment, corrective maintenance, and other things over the past 5 years or so. So the resolution in front of you is to do a transfer from the county general fund balance of $330,000 to the solid waste division program, which would be paid back in 2021. We would express that $330,000 deficit into increased per capita costs to residents in order to keep these sites running.
Thanks, Morgan. Mr. Miller or Keith, if either of you do you have any comments on this from your perspective?
Mr. Chairman, I'll simply add that of course, the 330 is projected. It's based on really just the first quarter of revenues versus expenses. So like any other projection, it's our best estimate of what's going to be needed through 2020. And it's important for this committee not only to consider the solid waste and recycling program and how much it is valued by the populace participating municipalities in general and this committee in particular, but to put it in the context of our greater county fiscal reality. Supervisor Anderson made mention earlier of the consequences of COVID-19 on projected sales tax revenues. At this point, the projection on lost revenues from what we budgeted is anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000. The need to support solid waste and recycling, if we do so at this rate, is going to draw down further on that general fund balance. That fund balance is also important to the county's fiscal health when it comes to borrowing. It's basically our savings account, and maintaining it at a certain minimum level to assure decent credit rating when we go out to borrow for capital improvement projects, for instance, is an important fiscal consideration. This budget adjustment, after this committee has an opportunity to review it and make its recommendation, goes to the executive committee, and then if ultimately to the county board. And that is really where the consideration needs to be given. There are some genuine and serious concerns about the county's ability to sustain the program, even as laid out by Mr. Girk just now, where there's an adjustment to operate the satellite sites all on Saturday. We may find that that it's not advisable to do even that. The CFO and I have been following this very closely, working with Mr. Girk and with the Solid Waste and Recycling Board under the chairmanship of Supervisor Bjork. We will be presenting to the executive committee, whatever comes out of this one, our professional assessment of the wisdom, if you will, of approving the entire $330,000, or perhaps considering a different model that scales back the scope of operations, because we simply cannot sustain the ask given our fiscal reality across the county finances.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Supervisor Bjork, I'm wondering as chair of the committee, if you have any thoughts.
Yes, I do. It seems like we're in a catch 22. Last night I went to the Grant Town meeting at their monthly meeting, and they had the subject of the solid waste, Dunn County, and they were very adamant in their statement that if the per capita goes up next year, that they plan on getting out. So if we're losing per capita, then the remaining ones will be going up, and it just there's a no-win situation because they just can't afford that kind of increase in their budget. They were, what should I say, that they're not mandated to provide solid waste to their citizens, but they are mandated to take care of their township roads. So that's where their money would have to go. So there is no easy answer, you know. And of the 5 elected officials on the Grant Town board there, 4 of them have their own dumpsters. So they're already paying double. They're paying for the private dumpsters, plus they're also paying per capita. So I don't know. That'll
Thank
be
you.
discussed more tonight. So that's my thought on that, Mr.
Right.
Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Those are the larger issues. Any other supervisors have any comments about this budget adjustment in particular?
Mr. Chairman, may I? Supervisor
Yes,
Morehouse?
Supervisor Morehouse.
So essentially what Mr. Girk is proposing is a loan that would be paid back by increase per capita. Can you give us some kind of idea, assuming this all works, how much the per capita would have to increase in 2021?
Yes, we've been forecasting per capita, as Mr. Miller mentioned earlier. You know, this is a forecast based on where we've come so far this year. We don't actually submit the final per capita typically till September to the municipalities each year after we've evaluated, you know, how things are going, where markets are going, et cetera, et cetera. So some of the factors that are going to need to be taken into account as we develop the 2021 per capita are obviously the $330,000 deficit payback if it's approved. We've already pulled out the city of Menominee per capita. They typically contribute about 100,000 in per capita in the recycling only program. They've indicated that they're very likely to pull out, although I haven't seen their statement for their 120-day separation clause yet. I'm anticipating it. They've been grooming their site for that for several years. We had excessive increases in our clean sweep costs to the tune of a 63% increase this year alone. We're actually not going to be able to have a clean sweep because of the excessive costs. We have a projected $95,000 cost for clean sweep this year, and we get a $15,000 grant from DADCAP to help that. Another main component is yard waste. Yard waste, since we've began inspections with the Department of Natural Resources, because of the volume of yard waste that we produce, we had to certify as yard waste composters and managers. There's a big cost to that, about $50,000 a year that we have never seen before in the past prior to the site inspections. We're moving forward with the Saturday only model as a forecasted model for 2021. We've also been working with the CFO on depreciation, adding depreciation into our budget model, which was done very differently in the past. I believe it's being properly assessed moving forward. That'd be 126,000 added in 2021. A fund balance replenishment portion to the tune of $339,000. And then we also have the discussion of possibility of a new transfer facility. The transfer station is 30 years old. Excuse me. And it's in desperate need of replacement. We do a lot of corrective maintenance on the facility. So to answer your question, current per capita for solid waste and recycling all in for towns and villages is $57.50. With these changes I have just mentioned, and again, this is a forecast with all of those things worked in, including the $330,000 payback, we would be adding $24.50 onto solid waste and $24 onto recycling, for a total, once you add the 2.5 per person household multiplier, that would bring it to $178.75 per household. Now that's a forecast, and that number is going to change as we work through these different models, and we work through the budget as it continues on this year. One thing I will mention is that if you were to look into privatized services, curbside services, you are likely going to pay much more than that. My curbside in Eau Claire, I pay about $211 a year. And remember, with curbside services, you don't have any access to our other programs like electronics recycling, batteries, all manner of bulbs and ballasts, all the other tires, all the other things that we incorporate into our program. So
why don't we, we're getting into the bigger picture things that I think are important. Well, once you wrap it up, Morgan, if you had further comments. I'm sorry.
The only other thing I was going to say is, because I thought the question would come up, is there are other options, as Mr. Miller talked about. They're just not popular because people want the convenience of the manned collection sites. And that's our biggest challenge. It's a very, very cost intensive model. There are other alternatives that would still provide solid waste and recycling services for all residents in the county. And I can bring those up at a future date.
Thank you. And these bigger questions are, as you've all pointed out, are going to have to be discussed by the entire board in the county. But going back to the question before us, which is specifically the 2020 budget amendments, adjustments.
Yes, I'd like to mention something, Tom.
Sure, Dave.
Um,
Are you going to refer to okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, we've talked about paying this back by a per capita, and that isn't our only option of paying it back. I don't disagree that it should be paid back, but we could also look at a referendum, and we've talked about that. That's been discussed, and it wasn't brought up here, but we could have a referendum for that. It's 330,000. The amounts that projected to get back this year of the two amounts that I've seen are over $900,000 from Health and Human Services, and now today with Register of Deeds. So we don't know what our general fund is going to be looking at, but we know it's going to be in a lot better shape than it was the beginning of this year with what we're getting back. If we don't take care of the outer reaches of the county, we're going to end up with having landowners start having their own little places of dumping stuff again, and that isn't environmentally safe. And that's the kind of stuff that, if we don't keep this program going, is going to happen. I checked into in our area going with curbside service or dumpsters, but that's solid waste. Everybody talks about that, but if you want to do recycling also, you have to double the price. And their recycling only takes the regular stuff, cardboard, paper, plastics. It isn't the stuff, TVs, electronics, ballasts, batteries. Tires. We're going to see that stuff end up in ravines, out in the woods, farmers, because they're not going to drive 30 miles. Right now in the northern part of Wilson Township, it's a 35-minute ride to the closest open site right now. We have to start, I think we have to take care of our residents and we have to take care of our county. And I think this is very important that we pass it. I know it's a lot of money, but I also know that we don't know what our fund balance is going to look like. We know we're going to have problems next year with revenue on our budget, but we have to, this is pretty important. So I just feel we should pass it.
Any other comments? I realize
one question about
Mike Supervisor Kinnear. Okay.
Morgan talked about this being paid back by the per capita for just 1 year. Would that per capita increase be going forward too?
Yes. So under this operational model, unless we would see a radical increase in revenues from all different sources, we would anticipate a similar deficit the following year as well. And so Bartlett's correct. I mean, we've already put our fees, our user fees, our tipping fees, I think where they need to be. I think the per capita has been historically undervalued because of the subsidies. So I think the per capita is ready for a major adjustment. But how much of an adjustment will people tolerate? That's the question. And Dave is also right. And I forgive me for not mentioning it. We do anticipate making a motion to request a referendum for levy in the fall, and that could potentially also be used as a source of revenue to help pay back that deficit. So it may not all be expressed through per capita, but a good portion of it certainly would be.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? So I would accept a motion with regard to approval of this resolution for the 2020 budget adjustment from solid waste. If someone would want to make that.
I'll make that motion. Supervisor Bjork.
Is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Morehouse.
Supervisor Morehouse. We've already had quite a bit of discussion, but is there additional discussion anyone would like to have? If not, then all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the motion carries, and that'll be forwarded then to the executive committee for action next week, I guess, right? Yeah, tomorrow, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you for a good discussion. And we'll have as supervisors and citizens, we're going to obviously have a lot of this discussion going forward. So we're at the point where we're done with our official business. Are there any announcements anyone would like to make going forward? The next meeting date is May 26th, and that will be a remote meeting. I think the governor's, I think it sounds like we may be able to meet again in person in June, although as Mr. Miller said earlier, that depends upon circumstances. Are there any topics that the committee would like to see put on the agenda going forward at some point in time when convenient? So if not, we'll have our update on the water quality plan and a few of the other things going forward, and we'll do the best we can in this awkward format to try and have good discussions. With that, I'll adjourn the meeting and look forward to seeing you all in the future. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
If you could get Tom Carlson back on his computer to stop the stream. And
Yep.
Thank you.
Stop.